Gentleman there, please. Do you want to use this?
Yeah, Reggie.
All right.
I missed the start of your talk, but I was interested to know, have you been able to use your 12 pillars to measure our current social standing in the UK? And also, are there any other countries that also you can measure? And is anyone nearer to this utopia?
I see, yeah. To sort of back test it against other nation state. I've not been that thorough because it's a huge subject, as you can imagine. But the idea is that, yes, it does become something that you compare with other nation states. Say, why is Sweden or something, what is it about that education system that's, producing those results? So you do start, when you do have different experiments going on in different nation states, then you can start to see how come they're getting that right and how come they're getting that wrong, and then it feeds you with the evidence that perhaps you could use. I haven't done it on a thorough basis because you can imagine the man hours of that project. But anecdotally, I think you can start to see which countries have a better system, and it just introduces the idea of a value system.
Being able to kind of measure it in terms of our society right now, in terms of where this utopia is, and how far away from it. Okay, well the question was, are we able to measure what we have in society now? How far away from it are we? And I think structurally, we're very near. We do have a department for education. We do have these things in place. I think the mindset backing it up. I mean, if everyone, it'd be great if everyone could really take this home with them, this idea that there are these 12 value systems. If the mindset can change, then really we've got practically everything in place. It doesn't need to be destroyed and rebuilt. It can be, just as I was saying, restructured. And especially the financial kind of aspects of it, you'll be surprised that if it sounds like, God, you want to change the whole money system. Well, it's just one tiny part of the money system, how money comes in the first place. And you can make changes there, and you'll be surprised how little anything else would change as a result. You still have, pension funds, you still have city trading and all these things in place. And of course there'll be little peaks and troughs, but don't forget, our fat cats in the city walk away with profit when there are highs and lows and peaks and troughs. They make money going down as well as going up. Don't forget, they trade short.
Thank you, Reggie. Any more questions, please? Stuart?
Yes, you mentioned that people are resistant to change, but as we saw in the referendum, about, 17 million people now, certainly 1 million or 2 people must have felt very nervous about affecting the way that this country has its relations with the EU and the rest of the world. So even though they were warned and they had all this scaremongering and all the rest of it, so I think that people are willing to risk change. It may be good, may be bad. I mean,
and to take a hit on it, potentially,
exactly.
Financially,
yes. 60 years ago, something like 97 or 98% voted for either Conservative or Labour. Now it's down to about 65% and it's declining. So people are willing to embrace change. So I think that if we can get some movement going, like you've described, then perhaps if we can sort of educate them, then people are willing to make a change. And so this is really just a comment on a question that you've got
again, is it exposing this sort of 12 value systems as being agreeable positions? What can we collectively agree upon? So that has the strength, that has the power.
Peter?
Just to let you know, I can't see. Can you remind me what the name of your website is that people can go on to?
Oh, there's several. Well, there is the humanistparty.com or .co.uk or both. You can contact me, you can leave your email, you can contact me at reggieadams.com. There's nowutopia.co.uk, so there are several. I'll put it up I'll put it up here shortly.
Or just use Google.
Yeah, Google Reggie Adams. I'm one of the
What's
first.
the question, please?
I don't have a question. When we talk about democracy, we should be allowed to speak, not just ask questions. We're supplicants in this room, and we're all subject to the expertise of the speaker. Personally, I found the whole thing an absolute appalling muddle. Sorry about this, Reggie.
That's all right.
But I couldn't connect with anything that you say. It seemed a hopeless muddle, as I say. And I think, to begin with, asking the question of what people want is fair enough, but to expect some coherence to come out of that, which is what happened at the Occupy movement in this country, and they started asking people, oh, a whole load of things, oh, this would be a good idea, oh, be a good idea, oh, let's have some of this, some of that. As though somehow you add all these things together and we get some coherent message at the end of it. And I'm afraid I don't go with that at all. And you talk about bad capitalism, good capitalism, and we all like to make a bit of money. And I think the worst reason for doing anything is to make money, unless you're a bank. Which, of course, the only reason for being in existence is to make money, which is why we're all in debt, of course. Yes, definitely. I can't find anything in what you're saying. There's sort of, I mean, you talk about socialism, and other people talk about socialism. It's probably more utopian now than it was 100 years ago. And I agree with you that Marx is sort of a 19th century thinker, which doesn't offer a great deal to the 21st century. I do agree with that. Some people still trying to sort of cling on to Marx, but I don't know. I mean, to me, if you're going to go for the centre of things, you have to attack money. That is what is at the centre of everything, you know. And that is where capitalism, good or bad, is at its strongest. So if you're going to attack the strong point, you have to attack the notion of money. In other words, and it's a difficult, it's a simple idea, but it's a very difficult idea to take on board. But ultimately, I see this as the solution to the world's problems. Whether it will happen, of course, is another thing. But my idea, which I've been working on for 15, 20 years, is basically that everything should be free. End of story.
Right, thank you. Thank you for your statement. Good statement.
Yeah. So a few great ones. So okay, so you see it's a sort of bit of a muddle because there's 50 minutes to put out some very big ideas. So each one of those human welfare indices, a value system. Yes, so there is further detail in those. So if you take something like education, and you can say, oh, what do we want for education? Well, how do we measure education? Well, there are a series of things like that, and it's not one thing. It's not just, exam results. You have to do that as a big indicator. You can also take in the three, focus on the 3 R's. You can take social emotional development. There's a list of, citizenship development and things like that. So there are a list of parameters, and it does become more detailed. Each of those 12 can become more detailed to find the agreeable points within them and how distributed it is and all those kind of things. So, in the 50 minutes, you can't build every detail in its entirety, but I just say that's a foundation, and you can build upon that foundation. If you're realising what societal aims are, you work towards it. On your other thing, we all do earn a living for our own self-gain, or no one should be expected to be completely selfless in what they do for a living. We go through our life, creating some sort of safety net for ourselves, creating what we can for our children, and to not see them struggling. I mean, we all do it or should be doing it. And in some senses, it's our responsibility to do it as parents. These kind of things is to, what we want as much comfort as we can achieve, as our own capabilities can achieve. I don't think we should dismiss that from the human spirit. That's half of what we are. Like I say, we shouldn't decouple that with who we are as societal creatures and how we contribute. As we're chasing what we want for ourselves, we pay tax on the way. And some of the biggest contributors to our society are those who have gained a lot from themselves, but have paid a fortune in tax doing so, and as they should. And obviously, we need to close down those tax loopholes. But money, I don't see as a reason it was all evil. It's the ultimate in democracy. If they were selling this bottle of water in the local shop for £10, I wouldn't buy it. I know someone else would sell it cheaper. And if all the companies were selling it, someone else would come up with a cheaper product. So I don't see money as a problem. And I don't see, I'm not talking about going back to a time where we're taking a chicken into the supermarket to exchange it for a loaf of bread. And the only problem with the money system, I think, is how it comes into being as credit. That debt is created on a balance sheet. It didn't come from money that they already had. It didn't come from savers. That represents like 1% of the money. The money that's on loan is from savers. And so there's a lot we don't appreciate of the money system. And that money system's brought into place as credit, and that credit obviously disappears when it's paid off. But there's interest charged on it, and that interest has to be found on what the money is, what project the money is for. But I suggest that the banks, private banks that produce credit, are not adding value to society. So if the bank of the taxpayer was the only institution that could create that credit, then the interest payment that came back would to pay the interest on credit there would be that would go back into the state system as providing either better services or lower taxes or a combination of the both. So that's the only fault I talk about with the money system. And yes, some things should be free. Food should be free, for example. Food, we've been sort of separated from our ecosystem so that all the food we get is bought in. But food should be free. Why do we have some trees that are just, acorn trees or something like that? Why aren't the trees that we find in our cities producing food? Why doesn't food go everywhere? It does it by itself. It just needs a little bit of tinkering. So yes, food is free. I would agree. So some things can come down to that, but it wouldn't stop the economy working. We'd still be chasing what we want, all these little gadgets and designer clothes and things like that. It wouldn't stop any kind of economy working if some of the basics are taken care of.
Thank you. Very comprehensive response. I always remember an essay I used to send. Ideology converts power and force into authority and consent. Discuss. It's quite interesting. Next question.
Yeah, so as a young student myself, I'm curious of how this theory would solve issues in society, such as like Syrian refugees, or particularly with the employment for the younger generation.
Yeah, employment.
Wouldn't affect the problem of refugees in the
Yeah. So yeah, that has to be. So well, we can only have so much influence on the world. I don't think we can always undo conflicts that happen in other countries, and there'll be a refugee crisis as a result. I do think the foundation, though, it's sort of, we have no power to colonialise or things like that. We've got involved in the Middle East, wrongly so in my opinion. But the human rights, for example, is a notion that's absorbed in the Middle East, where there is fundamentally a religious outlook in most, more than half of the population. So there are ideas that can permeate across the world, and I think this equation, the HWI times 12, is a sort of value system that
people will then, you know, what we thought was the Arab Springs, some of the people who were generating that were sort of secularists, you know, modernists, progressive-minded people, some of them, and a notion like this, I think, is a good value system for, you know, what are we doing in our society, you know, what should we be chasing, and then it brings accountability to governance, and really it brings accountability, I don't think there's a better word, accountability to the authorities that are in place, that are keeping things in place. And there's a different mindset. I think people presume that Middle Eastern cultures are kind of like we're all pretty much the same, and to some extent, of course, we all have the same sort of needs, but to some extent, you know, there's a whole different foundation of cultural values and things like that across the Middle East, and we shouldn't presume that it's so similar to ours that everything works out fine. But as far as so the conflict in the first place, yeah, I think there are some values that we can take forward as conflict resolution ideas to sort of say, well, look, what are you going through? You know, there is a sort of conflict resolution framework here, I think, within the idea that would diminish some of those ideas in the first place. But I think you mean the influx of refugees coming and what we should be doing to take care of them. So, yeah. So, you know, I think our army infrastructure, that kind of thing, is designed for war. It's designed for conflict. And the players involved think in that way. I think there should be perhaps a redesign in what we think of as our military, what they do, and turned over to something that is more of a humanitarian army. Exactly that. Exactly. So that the army is the best framework for delivering humanitarian aid, for example. You know, and safeguarding humanitarian aid, building big fences. Unfortunately, sometimes screening people who get into a refugee camp, those kind of things. So some of the refugee crisis could have been avoided by, allowing these safe zones. And then at the beginning of the conflict, you could see exactly what was happening on the map. There were Alawites and, kind of everybody else. Because don't forget, Christians and Alawites have got on okay together. You know, Sunni Islam in the middle of that space that came through, all that desert space right in the middle of the country. Then, of course, you've got the Kurds. And there could have been, a borderline set up and a separation of conflict. By the UN. That would have been the best, option. So there are these humanitarian campaigns that we can encourage the UN to be part of.
Thank you, Reggie, for that complicated answer. I'm interested in the idea of the social self and the ego, because many people believe the ego itself is a linguistic construction created through language. In fact, the ego is a construction created by language and nothing else.
So what I sort of mean by that is that we are the ambitious person that we do appreciate going through in life and achieving something through our capabilities. Achieving some sort of gain. Oh, I've sorted that out. Oh, I've decorated my bedroom and it's nice and cozy now. Or doing a job where we make some money and creating some sort of little niceness for ourselves. This is part of the human spirit. I mean, this is mostly what we're about. But again, like I say, we shouldn't decouple that from who we are as citizens and having social responsibility. So that's what I mean by the ego and social self. And as I said, the followers of Confucius would talk about that and ask what are some of the virtues that make you, more capable in that respect of what you do for yourself, what you gain, but also how you can have a positive impact on the society around you.
Thank you for answering my question on the chairperson should be neutral. Next question, gentleman there.
Great talk today, very good. What would you do about the state-sponsored royal family, House of Lords, and are you in favour of a basic income for all adults?
No to the basic income for all adults. I think that's something that we will have to find our place and our interests and how we make money and things like that, so no to that.
But as far as the House of Lords, I just think it's a useless part of what we've got. The judiciary could act as if we had a constitution, the judiciary safeguarding that constitution could act as a second chamber, so that all legislation going through something like there was more, this system, or if someone's out there designing a better one, the Magna Socia, a platform for direct democracy, if that was produced, a system like that, or that built around our parliament, could produce better legislation, you would still need to check that legislation that it was not reactionary. So it's like thinking fast and slow. Legislation we do year on year to get over little problems. But we shouldn't lose sense, as you were saying, of some of the fundamental issues, the rights of people and things like that. So that is a much more solid ground. And amendments to the Constitution should happen much slower over periods of 30, 50 years. Do you know what I mean? So I think the judiciary should be the second chamber. Yeah.
John, there you go. Use the mic.
I think in some of your content you're becoming a bit hierarchical. You think that I think a lot of people are still conditioned to think of social hierarchy at the ladder. You haven't really talked enough about a more egalitarian society where the differentials really are compressed. So you won't get this idea that you have to go onwards and upwards. And also you're under a very big delusion that all innovation comes from private sector effort. It doesn't.
Oh, no, not at
The
all.
state sponsors long-term innovation. All the big inventions, the really important stuff, has been sponsored by the state, mostly probably for military purposes and to gain power, but nonetheless that's who did it. And also long-term infrastructural problems, like the 150-year-old sewage system in London, were basically a local authority. And I think the state has a right. Also, you didn't say anything about the transfer of rental properties to local authorities, so that the local authorities could get the rent on that. You said this for banks, so they could get the interest and use it for social purposes. But that would also apply to rental property, because there's far too many rentiers, and a lot of IP rights need to be broken down, because you want to do anything about the environment. You can't have people who make good inventions desperate to protect their IP rights, so that invention will never be diffused rapidly enough throughout the world to make any impact on the environment. So you've got to go against the preservation of IP rights on certain things. People will not stop inventing because they aren't going to make packets of money. In a lot of cases, the real inventors of stuff don't make huge amounts of money. The people who make the money are people who buy up IP rights and take rentier income. So you've got to attack the system at many different levels, and you've got to gun for more social equality. But also, I disagree with the chap on that side. You've got to stop crapping on about perfecting human nature. Human nature as it stands for the last 10,000 years has been quite good on the whole. It's led to survival. So you can't try to change human nature. You can start by understanding what human nature really is, according to the latest views of evolutionary ethics and philosophy. You've got a good one there, but you have to work with people as they are, and a lot of flaws in some of this campaign, Risley, was too hierarchical. It didn't really address people as they really are. So the idea of trying to change mankind, that was an idea probably cobbled together by a hierarchy, a bourgeoisie, to get the workers more docile. I don't think the idea of trying to perfect individual human beings is a sensible one at all. You've got to work with the grain, not against it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think then, a responsible society should be promoting positive values, of people in society. And that's what it is the awareness of ideas, awareness of what might be a product of those ideas, and, through peer review and all these systems intellectual systems that we have, we can discourage bad ideas and promote good ideas. And I think, human history shows that we do that, and it changes slowly, but we do that over the course of human history. As far as innovation, I wasn't, I don't know what I said to make you think that only private sector. But
entrepreneurs.
yeah, I mean, but entrepreneurs are fueled by wanting to create and come up with something and in return to achieve an income from that. Not everyone, and I think the internet generation is throwing out more ideas. So we have an infinite, a whole bunch of other ideas for human collaboration on the internet. So, people get together, nerds and things, get together and create whole platforms and things like that. And they do it by contributing little bits of their time. And it has some value for them. They can put their name on it. It might help them get a job or this, that, and the other. But people do give up huge amounts of their time. So I'm not suggesting that all innovation and some of probably the best innovation comes from just, collaborating and a group of people wanting to see that positive result. And I think, we're in a great time for that. And we should be appreciating what technology can do for that. And again, the whole range of ideas for collaborating can produce. Did I cover all of it? The rental property, I do suggest that when you do focus on societal care, then you would inevitably make not the same sort of schemes as you've tried before in housing estates that, turned a bit rough and all these kind of things, but there are better ways of doing social housing and things like that integrates with the private sector. So I do believe, I wouldn't go so far as, like I say, it's a relationship between, I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel.
Thank you, Reginald. Quentin, got a question.
You seem to present the idea of a humanist party as a new idea.
Oh, no, I should have mentioned, no, it started in the 70s. John Swindon, there was formally started in the 70s. John Swindon and people like that ran for Fulham in the 80s. And so, it's been around for some time.
I seem to remember 20 or more years ago, there was a humanist party that put up candidates in pretty well every parliamentary constituency, and it seems to have disappeared.
A bit grassroots.
Actually, I'm pleased. It had nothing to do with the humanist movement I belong to. And I think
which is
we're
the BHA.
Nothing to do with it.
No, it's not. But it is more to do with the international humanists and things like that. So the international humanist movement is slightly different. The language is obviously the language. I was living in Brazil recently, and humanistas in South America are, some of them you find out that actually they're kind of Catholic, but they still call themselves humanistas, and it has a much more political, social kind of phrase, and it's similar to sort of socialist ideal kind of thing, being a humanista in South America. And the Juntos Podemos movement in Chile was a humanist movement that joined up with some Marxists and some Christian left, found these agreeable values, became the Juntos Podemos movement that did well in Chile and inspired the Podemos movement in Spain. So the international humanist movement is slightly different, but you'll see a difference in language. And the British Humanist Association here will sort of say, you can't, you call yourself a humanist, but you also call yourself like a Catholic, or you come from a Catholic family. This is like a contradiction of terms. And again, it's just widening of what you perceive to be humanism, and I perceive it to be, a core set of values, an ethical framework and things like that. So I understand the way the British Humanist Association is run here, that it can't be too political in any respect, because they've got sort of funding things and things like that, as far as I understand. But it's different across the world, the humanist as a movement.
Would you like to ask a question?
But sorry, if I just add to that the ideals, it's been good to put the ideas into detailed policy. But like I say, that shouldn't be limited by being this grassroots party. It's the promotion of the ideal of political humanism. I think it's something, hopefully I'll deliver the same speech to the Labour Party, my local Labour Party. So it's presenting these ideas as to, people in Greens, people in Liberal Democrat, people in Labour.
Within the Labour Party, there are very committed Christians. And if you put something as a sort of atheistic humanism,
Yeah, so it's not so much that. It's not anti-religious because it's promoting values like kindness and charity, and and then you'll meet a partnership, and you'll with other like-minded people. As I say, intellectually, we want to push ourselves into different camps and say they're atheists, they're completely different to me. Sorry, they're Christian and I'm an atheist. We want to push, but we do share so much. So many values, and sometimes that gives us much greater power when dealing with the ultimate thing that's destroying the planet at the moment, which is the ideology of deregulated capitalism.
Touching on what Terry said about communicating, anyone who has a chance should try and see the wonderful exhibition at the Wellcome Museum called This is the Voice, how human beings learn to speak by listening to nature. But what I want to say is I'm very sorry that your talk can't touch so much on politics. In this country, there's all the rest of the world, and from my point of view, the most important thing is to teach people all over the world that they must not have too many children, and to give them the means to achieve that.
Yeah, there's a brilliant organisation called Population Matters. Yeah. Oh, excellent. And, really the agreement is that the antidote to overpopulation, of course, is prosperity.
Education.
Yes, coupled with education. I'm not denying that. Coupled with, obviously, the equality of women and prospects for women in society and those kind of things, yes, coupled with that. But when societies or communities become more prosperous, they naturally move towards having fewer children and having them later in life. That's and that's what's happening in Europe, and that's what I'm saying. But the wealth and power and the politics is encouraging an ever increasing growth of education because of population. Because it's fueling profit for that, private equity. So I'm saying, so where we've reached population plateaus in Europe, of course, the project would be to still want to increase those populations, and I think that's one of the things that touches the immigration kind of issues is that there is this openness. That stuffing more people in the country will fuel its growth of GDP. I do think that's part of the design of our current system. So,
We'll never reach utopia.
well, as you say, it's just it is about education. It's saying in those communities, but it's empowering people to say, well, this could be a better place. It's not just look for those people, because those people in poverty are more inclined to look after themselves as opposed to look after their community. There are places that get themselves into a more individualised frame of mind and less of a societal responsible kind of frame of mind. So, yeah.
Thank you, Reginald. I always thought ambition was the best form of contraception for women. That's what I was always taught. Next question. Any questions? I think Reginald exhausted us. Any more questions?
Housing is free.
Yes.
Excuse me. What you indicated by your Venn diagram, all political parties outside us possibly have got 10 million ideas that you're suggesting.
Could you repeat the question?
So all right. Okay. Yeah.
Ultra left, etc., and something else outside of the large Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
This is political. This is where the conversation takes place.
Those people who belong to those political parties couldn't possibly adopt any of your ideas.
I'm saying that they could, and that's.
You're saying they could, or
They could. Sorry, are you saying outside that circle? Bring people over, convince people of the logics of the idea. Yeah, bring them away from voting for Tory, or bring them. Ultimately, if you can bring someone away from voting for the BNP, you've achieved quite a lot. But people do change over the course of their lives. They might be reactionary, a BNP member, but when they grow up and think things through, they sometimes change their whole outlook on those races.
So you're saying that those political parties would have to be erased? before your ideas were adopted?
Just saying that you can create an alliance, and this is an idea that could potentially create an alliance between Labour supporters, Green supporters, Liberal Democrat supporters, SNP for sure, because it's more left than Labour. It could be an alliance, a methodology for bringing together those voters who 2/3 of the nation didn't vote for Tory and don't want Tory. So you see what I mean? So, but 2/3 are not having their needs met, by the political system. Only the 1/3 that has agreed with the Tory ideology. You see what I mean? So I do think it's a rallying position between Green, Labour, Liberal Democrat. But of course, you can't possibly compromise with a notion like BNP. And the Tory notion of deregulated capitalism is a different ideological centre, and that's the prevailing one at the moment.
So you're saying to a certain degree, which you didn't have communism on there. Are you coming from a communist standpoint?
I'm not. I don't. I've never thought. I've never been a communist. No. And I don't think. I mean, I see some great ideas and things like that within them, but I do with Adam Smith and John Locke and John Stuart Mills as well. And so I don't think any one of those people should serve as a founding ideology any more than Karl Marx.
Right,
it's just a contribution of good ideas within there. But.
Gentlemen at the end. Do you have a question? Yes, yourself. No, you do. Any more final questions? Sorry.
What is that? All what questions?
Final.
Questions?
Oh, final questions. I couldn't catch the word. There was a question asked earlier, and you didn't have time to answer it.
Right.
You've got time to answer that.
What was that one?
It's about the youth job opportunities.
Yeah. So we, during a process of redesigning everything we do, everything will have to redesign away from the fossil fuel sector towards the sustainable sector. And as far as I can see, that will only create a sort of a boom opportunity, really, to getting everyone involved in redesigning everything we do and redesigning our impact on the planet. So I do see that there is, this is a fantastic time, I think, potentially, for being young and going out and realising some of the more important values of living in society and things like that. So I think the idea of whole, especially where in the sort of short to medium term, where everything needs to be redesigned, electric vehicles and anything else like that, there's a potential for great ideas for the future mostly from young people who grow up with understanding technology, understanding new ways of thinking and things like that. Much easier to change than us old fixed thinking people.
Any final questions? Yes?
I was just saying, how do you plan on targeting education and almost affecting ideas of you and their standpoints? Because certain areas, you're educated, basically the current education system is more like you match your English, geography. It's not like ideas for your ideology or anything.
Yeah, I do actually in the book have a ton to say about education, about how, there's so many leaps and advances technologically, but also in how we understand how the brain works. The leaps and bounds that happened in the science of neurology, of understanding how our brains work, the triune brain, how it all connects and all that kind of thing. So I think there are, again, our education systems need a massive redesign. One of the sort of simple aspects is that, some people say, it's so difficult to get kids to, or young people, I don't mean to say kids, young people to focus, focus on study and things like that. But
You try getting a younger person to not focus. If they're halfway through a game of some sort, a strategy game, I've got to achieve this, I want to achieve that, they are completely absorbed and focused, you know. And you can't get them to eat their dinner, or they, you know, sometimes they're jumping around wanting to go to the toilet, and they don't want to do that because they're so completely fixated. You know, there's an opportunity there for you know, to bring them into a world of knowledge. I think we're sort of missing, or perhaps we'll get round to it. So I think there's, again, I think sometimes we're sort of frightened to talk about moral education as well, you know. But I think a situation like this, with the sort of where if you agree to a constitution, for example, you are teaching, you know, something about the nature of citizenship, and you know what your social responsibilities are, and these are sort of moral positions that you don't go around happy slapping someone, you know, something like that. You know that you why that's not a good idea or something like that. I mean, it's not, that's a bit patronising, but it is presenting something that could be better understood if you have a written constitution based on some of these sort of values of what society is all about. I think that in itself is essentially a foundation for moral education. Because the thing about moral education is we've had a couple of prime ministers on the left and on the right who were Christians and saying, well, you know, they have a difficult idea to find out what is a moral education outside of religion. You know, they think only within religion can you have a moral education, you know, about what is kindness and what is all compassion and things like that. And only people within religion talk about those ideas. But these are societal ideas, as I suggest. I think they were written in religions in the first place because, or rather they've become popular. Those religions have become popular because they did make the world a better place in that period. You know, there was a period across, you know, where these religions come from where people were sacrificing their babies and things like that, you know. So Christianity and Islam, you know, wiped out those other religions. Sometimes, you know, there were much more brutal religions that were going on, you know. And some religions were about complete conflict. You know, some of the Athenians or some of the Norse religions were just about going and raping and pillaging, and you know, and it was all tied into their worldview and things like that. So religions have constructed us examples of moral education, and I think outside religions, it's something like this. You know, there is also a moral foundation that could be taught through having a constitution.
Well, right, I'd like to thank Reginald very much for his talk. Very coherent, very rigorous, and explanatory. It's a model he's produced. It is a model. So we'll see how we get on with that model. I'd like to thank you very much. We do retire to the Penderol for a drink after this, so you're all welcome to come. So thank you to Reginald.
Okay, and please do, thank you. And please put your email down. Let's continue a conversation by email. It would be really nice to keep the conversation going. Let me, when you finish, can I just get a couple of the sheets out there, and then that's it.